Welcome to the Contract Bank. I am business attorney Roxanne Smithers, and in this video we are going to be discussing the Master Videography Services Agreement. A bit self-explanatory. So this agreement is going to cover the terms and conditions for videographers and their clients. We've set this agreement up as a master agreement so that if you have ongoing services and projects with recurring clients, you don't have to negotiate a new contract each time. You can simply issue what we have in here, a schedule of services or a scope of work that will cover the specific details of each project, knowing that the terms and conditions of this master agreement will apply every single time. We're going to get into this agreement so that you understand all of the terms. So we're starting this agreement with section 1 that has the scope of services. This is going to provide some initial information about what you're going to be providing as a videographer. But a lot of the specifics of that relationship and of that project are going to be in the services schedule that you'll find at the end of the agreement. So then we're going to move to section 2. Section 2 covers the process by which your client will reserve your services, reserve sessions with you. This includes whether they'll be paying a deposit, scheduling those opportunities with you. Okay. Section 3 is going to cover fees and expenses, how you're being paid, and whether or not you will be reimbursed for any cost or expenses that you incur for the session above and beyond your standard fee. If there's a specific location that your client wants you to use, if there's a specific format or specific equipment that your client wants you to utilize, this provides you an opportunity to pass those costs on to the client or to make the client responsible for reimbursing you for those costs or expenses. Section 4 covers any changes that you or your client want to make to that scope of services. You have to always look out for scope creep. This is a particular problem if you are providing services on a flat fee and you have quoted that flat fee based upon a specific timeline, a specific level of complication to the project. And if that starts to change, you want to make sure that you have a process in this agreement to revise that scope of services, to get additional time to provide those services, or to get additional compensation for those services. Section 5 covers weather. What happens if your session is intended to be outdoors? This provision provides an opportunity for the parties to agree on backup arrangements, also agree to any necessary protections for yourself, your equipment, or your staff. And it gives you the option to decline a location if you are uncomfortable with the impact of inclement weather on that session. Section 6 details the process for specifying the location for a session and specifically deals with whether permitting or other permissions or authorizations are required for a location. It makes it clear the responsibility for obtaining those permissions or permits lie with the client, and if you obtain that, then the client will be responsible for reimbursing you for that. Section 7 covers rest breaks and meals. If your event or session is longer than 3 hours, we've included information for break intervals, as well as if the event includes a meal or food, meal and food for yourself and at least one assistant. Section 8 covers how the client can cancel and the process for that and what compensation you are entitled to if the client cancels. Section 9 covers what happens if you are unable to perform the services, whether by injury, illness, or some other event that is beyond your control. And this provision deals with what happens in that situation. Section 10 gives you some license in terms of creativity. The client in this provision is granting to you editorial, production, and content control in producing the final product for the client. And then it puts some limits on your ability to control audio or video quality for circumstances that are beyond your control. And that particularly comes in place if there is inclement weather or if there is a location that your client has picked that is particularly tricky. Section 11 deals with intellectual property rights and makes it clear that you will own the content that is created until you are paid and or you grant ownership rights to the client. Section 12 covers the duration or term of the contract, as well as the process by which the parties can terminate the agreement. It also details what happens if the master agreement is terminated while there are still pending scopes of work or schedules of services on the books between the parties. Section 13 puts a limit on your liability. This provision has two types of limits on your liability. There's a dollar amount limit on your liability, meaning there's a cap on the amount of money you could be liable for if you cause a problem or there's a claim that the client brings against you. And it also puts a limit on the types of damages that you can be held liable for. Section 14 details that both parties agree to indemnify the other party. That means being responsible if your actions cause the other party to incur damages, losses, or to have to suffer a claim. A best example of that is if your client requests a specific location but does not make sure to get proper permitting or permission for that location, and a claim is brought against you. Your client will be responsible for taking over that claim, reimbursing you for the costs associated with that claim, or defending you against that claim. They will have to indemnify you. Section 15 and 16 cover the nature of the relationship. You are an independent contractor, not an employee of your client. You are free to provide videography services to other clients and customers, and your client is free to utilize other videographers. This is not an exclusive agreement. Section 17 and 18 detail the law that governs this agreement, as well as the process for resolving any disputes. The parties have an opportunity to negotiate a resolution, to mediate a resolution, or ultimately to arbitrate a resolution. Section 19 covers the process by which proper notice is given for any issues in the contract, and that's usually in writing. And then sections 20 and 21 give a roadmap for a judge, a jury, or an arbitrator to apply the terms of the agreement to your dispute. Finally, section 22 makes it clear that the full nature of the relationship is detailed in this written agreement, and that if the parties decide that they want to change any of the terms or the nature of the relationship, that both parties have to agree, and it must be done in writing. To follow up to this agreement, we have that schedule of services that can be used over and over again for each project. This is where you're going to provide the specific details for each session. Event details, the type, the date, the time, the location. You'll also detail the specifics of how you'll be paid for a project, whether you're requiring a deposit, the amount of that deposit, what your hourly rate is, expenses that you are going to be reimbursed for. The agreement also provides an opportunity for you to give the client a release so that they can use your work product for commercial purposes. This schedule of services details what happens if the client cancels in advance, how much they still have to pay, how much they are able to either recoup or not have to pay you for your services. And this section also provides an opportunity to make any one-off modifications to the master agreement that will only apply to this schedule of services. After the schedule of services, we have that release rider that allows you to give the client an opportunity to utilize the content or the final product for commercial purposes. And you can put some limits on that to the extent you guys negotiate that. And you can also make it a perpetual release or a revocable release. Then finally, we have a individual participant agreement, release. This document is utilized by any additional individuals that will be part of the event that you are going to be capturing and utilizing in the final product. This gives their permission for their images to be used by you as well as your client. And the release includes language for any minors so that their parent or guardian can sign that release. So this is a bit of a summary of the Master Videography Services Agreement. If you decide to purchase this agreement, you will receive it in PDF form as well as an editable Word document that you can modify to fit your specific needs. Once again, this is Roxanne Smithers, your business attorney, and I want to thank you for visiting me in the Contract Bank.